marathon.
What is that guy doing at the starting line? Barefoot?
This isn't a cotton field. This is a marathon.
The crowd burst into laughter. A half-eaten banana fell on his shoulder. Someone yelled,
Checking scan! Eat it, young man, you'll need it!
A referee pushed him over,
Get out of the way.
regained his balance, wiped the stain off his shirt, straightened up. His fingers found the hospital bracelet on his wrist.
I registered. I paid. I'll run, sir.
The referee laughed in his face.
He won't last 10 minutes.
Nobody believed him. Everyone laughed. 2 hours later, 50,000 people were chanting his name. But whose name is engraved on that bracelet? And what is he really running for? To understand what happened at that starting line, you need to go back to 4:45 that same morning, to a one-bedroom apartment on Chicago's South Side. Bryson Underwood woke without an alarm. His body had been waking at 4:45 every morning for 3 years, because that was the time he ran. The apartment told you everything. Peeling paint, a hot plate where a stove should have been, a mattress on the floor. On the wall above it, one photograph. His mother Denise, smiling, healthy, full of life. That was taken 4 years ago. She didn't look like that anymore. He ate 2 slices of white bread with peanut butter, filled a used plastic bottle with tap water, pulled on his only pair of running shoes, taped at the sole, worn through at the heel, put on an oversized white t-shirt that used to belong to his father, before his father walked out and never came back. On the counter sat 2 things: his marathon registration printout and a handwritten note. Run your race, nobody else's. Coach D. That was from Coach Earl Davidson, the man who paid Bryson's $120 entry fee from his own pocket. Coach Davidson had discovered Bryson 3 years ago, running home from school, 14 miles through the roughest streets on the South Side every single day because his family couldn't afford bus fare. Coach Davidson timed him on the school track, a 4-minute, 28-second mile, at 15. No coaching, no plan, just a kid trying to get home. In 31 years, Coach Davidson had never seen anything like it. 3 years later, Bryson had only gotten faster. But before leaving that morning, Bryson made one stop. Southside General Hospital, room 208. His mother lay in the bed. Denise Underwood, 41, though she looked 60. Stage 3 cancer had hollowed her out. 1 V-lines in both arms. The surgery she needed cost $85,000. No insurance, no savings, no one to help. Denise knew where he was going. With fingers barely strong enough to unclasp it, she slid the hospital bracelet off her own wrist and placed it onto his. It read, Underwood, Denise, RM 208. She whispered, "Bring it back to me, baby." He kissed her forehead, said nothing, looked at her with eyes that carried everything words could not, turned, and walked into the dark. On the L train heading north, somewhere between Garfield and Roosevelt, his left shoe gave out. The sole split clean from the toe. He tried pressing it back. Wouldn't hold. He sat there a long moment, looking at both shoes, taped, torn, finished. Then he pulled them off, placed them under his seat, and rode the rest of the way barefoot. That was not a statement. That was not a stunt. That was a young man whose shoes had simply run out of life before he did. Now, while Bryson was riding that train barefoot, let me tell you who was waiting at the other end. Garrett Collins, head race marshal of the Chicago Lakefront Classic. 22 years running this event. Navy blazer, heavy lanyard, earpiece. He spoke to volunteers the way a hotel manager speaks to housekeeping. Polite on the surface, controlling underneath. Every year he did the same thing. Stood near registration and scanned every runner who walked through. He wasn't checking bib numbers. He was checking faces, looking for anyone who didn't fit the image. And then there was Trevor Whitfield, 24 years old, defending champion. He arrived in a black SUV with the Apex Athletics logo on both doors. Full compression gear, custom visor with his name in gold thread, Apex Velocity racing shoes, $380. Behind him, personal trainer, nutritionist, social media manager already filming his warm-up for a sponsored post. Trevor had never lost this race. Never worried about money or shoes or whether his mother would survive the week. Never ridden a train at 5 in the morning. Never eaten 2 slices of bread and called it breakfast. His shoes alone cost more than 3 months of Bryson's rent. That single detail tells you everything about the distance between these two runners. Not the distance in miles, the distance in worlds. And in less than 3 hours, those two worlds were going to collide on the same stretch of asphalt. One of them was going to break. The registration table was near the east entrance of Grant Park. That's where Bryson walked up, barefoot, shirt hanging off his shoulders, hospital bracelet catching the early morning light. Helen Moore had been volunteering at this table for 19 years. She was 62 years old, a retired school teacher, and she had checked in thousands of runners. She looked up, saw a barefoot young black man standing in front of her, and for a brief moment her eyes flickered. Not with cruelty, but with surprise. Bryson placed his printed confirmation email on the table without a word. Helen looked at it. She typed the name into her screen. Underwood, Bryson. Bib number 312. Entry fee paid. Everything valid. She smiled and handed him his bib. Good luck, sweetheart. Bryson reached for it, but before his fingers touched the paper, a hand landed on his shoulder from behind. Heavy, firm, and uninvited. Garrett Collins had spotted him from across the tent. He walked straight past 4 other runners without a glance and stopped directly in front of Bryson. He didn't address Bryson. He addressed Helen. What's going on here? Helen explained calmly. Registered, paid, confirmed. Everything in order. Garrett looked Bryson up and down. The bare feet, the oversized shirt, the hospital bracelet. His lip curled slightly, the way someone reacts to something unpleasant on the bottom of their shoe. This isn't a playground, Garrett said. This is a sanctioned marathon, 26 miles. You can't run that without shoes. It's a liability issue. It's a safety hazard. And frankly, it's a distraction. Bryson spoke quietly. There's no rule that says I need shoes, sir. I checked the regulations before I registered. He was right. The Chicago Lakefront Classic had no footwear requirement in its official rulebook. Not one line. Garrett's jaw tightened. He leaned closer. Listen, son. I don't know who put you up to this, or if you think this is funny, but this race is for serious athletes. Real competitors, not for whatever this is. He waved his hand up and down at Bryson's body like he was describing a mess someone needed to clean up. Helen interjected. Garrett, his registration is completely valid. He has every right to— Garrett didn't let her finish. He pulled the radio from his belt and pressed the button. Lawson, East registration, now. Officer Pete Lawson arrived within 2 minutes. Security badge, broad shoulders, hands already positioned like he was expecting trouble. Garrett pointed at Bryson. Remove this individual from the corral. He's not authorized to participate. Lawson grabbed Bryson's arm. Bryson did not resist, did not pull away. He simply looked at the officer and said, "Sir, I have a right to be here. I registered. I paid the fee." By now, a crowd had gathered. Phones were out. People were watching, some with curiosity, most with amusement. And the comments started. Loud, public, unashamed. A man in a red jacket shouted, "Just drag him out already! He's holding up the race!" A woman behind him, arms crossed, called out, "Someone check if he stole that bib! There's no way he paid for it!" Another voice from the back, laughing, "This is what happens when you let anyone register online. No standards." And then, Trevor Whitfield appeared. Trevor was walking toward the elite corral with his entourage when he noticed the commotion. He stopped, looked at Bryson, looked at Bryson's bare feet, looked at the crowd, and he saw exactly what he wanted. A camera-ready moment. Trevor walked over slowly, reached into his gear bag, and pulled out a brand new pair of spare shoelaces. He dangled them in front of Bryson's face, close enough to brush his nose, and grinned. "Here you go, buddy." "Oh, wait. You'd need shoes first." His entourage laughed. The crowd roared. Trevor turned to the nearest camera, pointed his thumb back at Bryson, and said the line that would haunt him for the rest of his career. "Someone call the kid an Uber. He's in the wrong neighborhood." The laughter was deafening now. A man in the front row grabbed a half-empty water bottle and tossed it at Bryson's feet. It hit the asphalt and splashed across his bare toes. "Cool your feet down, champ," the man called out. "Long race ahead." Bryson stood still through every single second of it. His hands trembled at his sides, not with fear, but with the effort of holding back everything inside him. He looked down at the hospital bracelet on his wrist. His thumb brushed across the letters of his mother's name. He did not move. He did not speak. He did not flinch. He refused to give a single person the satisfaction of seeing him break. And then Helen Moore did something that no one in that crowd expected. She stood up from behind her table, pushed her chair back so hard it scraped against the pavement. She stepped between Bryson and Officer Lawson and planted her feet like she had no intention of moving for the rest of her life. Her voice was steady, firm, and loud enough for every phone camera within 50 feet to capture every word. "This young man is registered. He paid his entry fee. There is no footwear rule anywhere in this race's regulations. I've read them more times than anyone here. If you remove him, you will do it over my signature and my 19-year resignation. And every single phone pointed at us right now will record exactly what that looks like." Silence fell over the crowd like a curtain. Officer Lawson looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at the phones. Dozens of them, all recording, all pointed directly at him. He did the math. He stepped back. Through gritted teeth, barely opening his mouth, he said, "Fine. But when he drops out at mile 3, that's on you, Helen." Then Garrett leaned in close to Bryson. So close only Bryson could hear, and whispered, "You're going to embarrass yourself out there, boy. And when you crawl off that course crying, I'll be right here to say I told you so." Bryson said nothing. He pinned bib number 312 to his oversized shirt with steady hands. Then he turned and walked, barefoot, silent, completely alone, to the very back of the starting corral. 18,000 runners ahead of him, not one of them looking back. Behind him, the laughter still echoed across the registration tent. He didn't know it yet. None of them did. But every insult, every laugh, every object thrown, every word meant to break him. Bryson was storing all of it, converting it, compressing it into something dense and hot and unstoppable, deep inside his chest. The crowd had just loaded a weapon and handed it to the very person they were trying to destroy. The starting gun cracked through the morning air like a whip, and 18,000 runners surged forward in a wave of neon and sweat and ambition. The sound was massive. Shoes slapping pavement, crowd roaring, helicopters banking overhead. The Chicago Lakefront Classic Marathon had begun. Bryson Underwood started from the very last position in the corral. Dead last. Behind every elite runner, every weekend jogger, every first-timer with brand new shoes and a nervous smile. For the first 2 miles, he was invisible, just another body lost in the sea of moving limbs. Nobody looked back. Nobody thought about the barefoot young man they had laughed at 5 minutes ago. He was already forgotten. But a motorcycle-mounted camera operator near the 2-mile marker caught something on his lens that made him do a double-take. He swung his camera down and held the shot. Bare feet on asphalt. No shoes. No socks. Just skin hitting pavement in a rhythm that didn't look like pain. It looked like music. That footage cut to the broadcast booth, and Sandra Wells saw it. Sandra Wells had been covering distance running for 11 years. She had seen every kind of runner: elites, amateurs, charity runners in costume, people running with prosthetics, people running to raise money for diseases that had taken their families. She thought she had seen everything. But she had never seen a barefoot teenager running a sanctioned marathon from the back of the pack with a hospital bracelet on his wrist. She leaned into her microphone. "We've got a young runner, no shoes, no gear, running from the very back of the field. Let's keep an eye on this one." Here's what the cameras showed over the next 30 minutes, and what the commentators could not explain. Bryson ran differently than every other person on that course. His foot strike was a textbook 4-foot landing, the ball of his foot kissing the pavement first, absorbing the impact, before his heel ever touched down. His cadence was unusually high. Short, rapid steps, each one precise, each one light. Most recreational runners slam their heels into the ground and let the shock travel up through their knees and spine. Bryson's feet barely seemed to touch the road at all. His breathing was rhythmic, almost hypnotic. 3 strides in, 2 strides out. His arms hung low and relaxed. His shoulders never rose. He didn't look like he was racing. He looked like he was gliding. That technique, that effortless, almost animal efficiency, was not taught. It was built. Built across 3 years and thousands of miles of Southside pavement, running 14 miles home from school every single day because a bus pass cost money his family did not have. Built in the dark, in the rain, in the snow, on concrete and gravel and broken sidewalks. Nobody coached him. Nobody designed a program for him. His body simply learned the way water learns the shape of a riverbed, by flowing through it, over and over, until the path becomes part of you. By mile 5, Bryson had passed 3,000 runners. The first whispers started along the route. Spectators glancing at each other, pointing, pulling out phones. "Wait, is that kid barefoot?" By mile 8, he was inside the top 300. Runners who had trained for months with heart rate monitors and altitude camps and sports nutritionists were watching a barefoot young man in an oversized t-shirt float past them like they were standing still. Some of them stared. Some shook their heads. One runner, a 40-year-old accountant from Wisconsin, would later tell a reporter, "He passed me at mile 7, and I swear he wasn't even breathing hard. I've never seen anyone move like that." Back in the broadcast booth, Sandra Wells pulled up Bryson's registration data. Bib 312. Bryson Underwood, age 18, no team affiliation, no sponsor, entry fee paid by a third party. She read it twice. Then she looked at the monitor showing Bryson weaving through the pack like a ghost and said on air, with the kind of quiet awe that makes viewers lean closer to their screens, "I don't know who this young man is, but I think we're all about to find out." At mile 8 of the Chicago Lakefront Classic, nobody was laughing at Bryson Underwood anymore. But nobody knew his story yet either. That part was coming. And when it arrived, it was going to shatter every assumption made at that starting line. Who paid his entry fee? Why was he wearing a hospital bracelet? And how was a barefoot runner with no training, no team, and no shoes keeping pace with professionals who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment? By mile 10, something was happening that the commentators could not ignore. Bryson Underwood, barefoot, unsponsored, unknown, had entered the lead pack. The top 30 runners. This was where the race changed character entirely. The recreational joggers were miles behind now. The charity runners in costumes were gone. Up here, every single person was a machine. Lean, sculpted, sponsored, trained to peak performance by teams of professionals. And running among them, matching them stride for stride, was an 18-year-old with no shoes, no team, and a hospital bracelet on his wrist. The other elite runners noticed. You could see it in the way their eyes dropped to his feet, then snapped back to the road ahead, like they had seen something that didn't make sense and decided to ignore it. Most of them dismissed him. They had seen runners burn bright and flame out before. This kid would hit the wall at mile 15 and vanish. That was the assumption. That was the comfortable thought. One runner didn't dismiss him. Clark Jennings, a 38-year-old veteran who had run 11 marathons and finished in the top 20 in 9 of them, pulled alongside Bryson for a brief moment at mile 11. He looked down at Bryson's bare feet. He looked at the young man's face. And then he did something small that none of the cameras caught, but Bryson would never forget. He nodded. Just once. A quiet gesture from one runner to another that said, without a single word, "I see you. You belong here." Then Jennings pulled ahead, and Bryson was alone again among strangers. But one stranger had noticed more than the others. Trevor Whitfield was leading the pack. He had been in first place since mile 4, running with the easy, entitled confidence of a man who expected to win because he always did. His stride was smooth. His breathing was controlled. His $380 shoes carried him forward like they were engineered to do. Everything was going according to plan. And then he saw Bryson in his peripheral vision. Trevor did a double take. His head snapped to the right, and for a full second, he stared. He recognized him. The barefoot kid from the corral. The one he had dangled shoelaces in front of. The one he told to call an Uber. The joke. The punchline. And now that punchline was running beside the top 30 athletes in the Midwest, matching their pace like it cost him nothing. Trevor's expression shifted. Amusement to confusion. Confusion to irritation. Irritation to something harder. Something that looked like the first crack in a wall that had never been tested. He increased his pace. A deliberate surge. The kind of move designed to break weaker runners and remind everyone who was in charge. Bryson matched it, effortlessly, like he hadn't even noticed. At mile 16, Trevor made his move. He dropped back deliberately and settled into stride right beside Bryson. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Their footsteps were the only conversation. One pair cushioned by $380 of technology, one pair naked against the asphalt. Then Trevor muttered without looking at him, "You're embarrassing yourself." Drop out now before it gets worse. Bryson said nothing. His eyes stayed on the road. His left hand drifted down and brushed the hospital bracelet on his wrist. A gesture so small you would miss it if you weren't looking. But the motorcycle camera was looking, and Sandra Wells, watching from the booth, saw it. Then Trevor bumped him, shoulder to shoulder, hard, deliberate. The kind of contact that could be denied in a press conference, but felt like a punch when it landed. Bryson stumbled, half a step, maybe less, but he didn't break stride. He absorbed it the way his feet absorbed the pavement, and he kept moving. Sandra Wells leaned into her microphone carefully. There appeared to be deliberate contact between Whitfield and the young, unsponsored runner. We'll keep watching that. By mile 18, the race had changed again. But this time, it wasn't happening on the course. It was happening on the sidewalks. The spectators had been following the leaderboard on the big screens mounted along the route. They had watched Trevor's name sit comfortably at the top for miles. But now, a second name was climbing. Fast. Bib 312. Underwood. And on the screen, the live footage showed what the name couldn't. A barefoot young man running with 30 of the best athletes in the city, and not slowing down. Social media caught fire. It didn't build slowly. It detonated. Hashtags exploded across every platform. Hashtag Barefoot Boy and hashtag WhoIsBryson312 began trending within minutes. People along the route who had been politely clapping for every runner suddenly started screaming. Not cheering, screaming. Raw, full-throated, from the gut screaming. For one runner. For the one with no shoes. A woman 3 rows deep in the crowd held up a sign she had painted on cardboard during the race, the ink still wet. Run, Barefoot Boy. Bryson heard his name from strangers for the first time in his life. Not yelled in anger, not spoken in pity, screamed in belief. The sound hit him somewhere deep, somewhere he had built walls around a long time ago. His eyes glistened, his jaw tightened. He blinked it away, hard, and pushed forward. The world that had mocked him 1 hour ago was beginning to see him. Back in the broadcast booth, Sandra Wells had sent her field producer to dig into Bryson's background. The producer made calls, searched records, found a phone number for a former high school track coach on the South Side, a man named Earl Davidson. The producer dialed. Coach Davidson picked up on the second ring. But he didn't answer from a living room or an office or a track. He answered from the waiting room of Southside General Hospital. He was sitting in a plastic chair, 6 feet from room 208, beside a woman named Denise Underwood, who was watching the marathon broadcast on a phone screen held up by a nurse. The producer asked 3 questions. Coach Davidson answered all of them. The producer hung up, called Sandra, and told her everything. Sandra Wells sat back in her chair. She had the story. The whole story. The kind of story that doesn't come along twice in a career. She could break it right now. Mile 18. Massive audience. Perfect moment. But she didn't. She told her producer, "Not yet. Let it build." Sandra Wells understood something that most people in media never learn. That the power of a story is not in the information. It is in the timing. And she was going to wait for the exact moment when the truth would hit the hardest. When every viewer, every spectator, every person watching on every screen in every city would feel it not in their head, but in their chest. That moment was coming, and it was going to change everything. Mile 20. Bryson Underwood was running in second place. Second place, out of 18,000 runners. A barefoot young man with no sponsor, no team, no coach on the sideline, no nutrition plan, no hydration pack. running in second place at the Chicago Lakefront Classic Marathon. One position behind the defending champion, Trevor Whitfield, who had every advantage the sport of distance running could offer, and was now checking over his shoulder every 30 seconds. This was the moment Sandra Wells had been waiting for. She gave the signal to her producer. The cameras locked onto Bryson. A tight shot of his bare feet striking the pavement, then pulling wide to show his full frame. The oversized shirt, the bib pinned crookedly to his chest, the hospital bracelet catching the sunlight on his left wrist. Sandra spoke slowly, every word deliberate, every pause calculated. She had been in broadcasting for 11 years, and she had never delivered a segment like this. She knew, the way veteran journalists know, that what she was about to say would not just describe a race. It would stop one. The young man you are watching right now is Bryson Underwood. He is 18 years old. He lives on the south side of Chicago with his mother, Denise Underwood, who at this very moment is lying in room 208 at Southside General Hospital. Denise has stage 3 cancer. She needs a surgery that will cost $85,000. The family has no insurance, no savings, no one to turn to. Sandra paused, let the silence do its work, then continued. The first place prize for this marathon is $50,000. Bryson Underwood is not running for a trophy. He is not running for a sponsorship deal. He is running because his mother is dying, and this is the only thing he knows how to do. One more pause, the longest one. Then, quieter now, almost a whisper. The hospital bracelet on his wrist, that is not his. It belongs to his mother. She took it off her own wrist this morning and placed it on his. And she told him, "Bring it back to me." For 3 full seconds, the broadcast booth was silent. No commentary, no analysis, no replays. Just the sound of Bryson's bare feet on the road, and 50,000 people beginning to understand what they were watching. The broadcast played on the jumbotrons mounted along the course. The giant screens that had been showing split times and sponsor logos were now showing Sandra's words, subtitled, alongside the footage of Bryson running. And the reaction was something that no one at that race, no one in the broadcast booth, no one watching from home would ever forget. People began to cry, not quietly, not politely. They broke. Strangers on the sidewalk turned to each other with tears streaming down their faces. A man in a business suit pressed his hand over his mouth and looked away. A mother holding her daughter's hand crouched down and pulled the girl close. A group of college students who had been drinking beer and cheering for fun put their cups down and stood in silence. The cheering did not stop, but it changed. It was no longer the sound of people watching a competition. It was the sound of people watching a son try to save his mother's life with the only thing he had: his body, his feet, his lungs, his will. The cheering became raw, desperate. It sounded like begging, like prayer. Within minutes, a new hashtag began spreading across every platform. Hashtag Run for Denise. It trended nationally in 8 minutes, internationally in 20. Messages poured in from strangers in cities Bryson had never heard of, in languages he did not speak, all saying the same thing. Run, Bryson, run. And 6 miles south, inside Southside General Hospital, in room 208, Coach Earl Davidson held his phone up beside Denise Underwood's bed. The broadcast played through the small speaker. Sandra's voice filled the room. Every word about her son, about the bracelet, about why he was running. Denise listened with her eyes closed. Her hand, thin, trembling, bruised purple from the IV lines, reached up and pressed flat against the phone screen, as if she could touch him through it. As if 20 miles of city could disappear if she just pressed hard enough. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The tears rolling down her hollow cheeks said everything. Back on the course, Bryson didn't know any of this was happening. He didn't know about Sandra's broadcast. He didn't know about the hashtag. He didn't know that his mother was pressing her hand against a phone screen 20 miles away. All he knew was the road ahead, the pain in his feet, and the bracelet on his wrist. And that was enough. It hit him at mile 21. Runners call it the wall. Scientists call it glycogen depletion. But neither of those terms captures what it actually feels like, which is your entire body turning against you at once. Every muscle screaming stop, every joint locking, every nerve ending firing signals of pure agony straight into your brain. Your legs, which have been carrying you for 2 hours, suddenly feel like they are filled with wet concrete. Your vision narrows to a tunnel. Your hearing goes soft, like someone stuffed cotton into your ears. The world becomes distant and strange, and the only thing that is real anymore is pain. That is what hit Bryson Underwood at mile 21. The asphalt had been hot all morning. Now, with the sun directly overhead and the temperature climbing to 89 degrees, the road surface had become something closer to a griddle. Every runner in the race could feel it through their shoes. Bryson felt it through his skin. His bare soles, which had carried him flawlessly for 21 miles, were blistering. The skin was tightening, splitting, peeling away with every step. Each footfall sent a jolt of pain so sharp it flashed white behind his eyes. His breathing broke. The perfect rhythm, 3 strides in, 2 strides out, collapsed into ragged, shallow gasps. The metallic taste of exhaustion flooded his mouth. The roar of the crowd, which had been building for miles, faded into a distant hum, like he was sinking underwater and the surface was pulling further away with every second. He dropped from 2nd place to 4th, then 6th. Runners passed him one by one, runners with shoes, with hydration packs, with support teams handing them electrolyte gels and energy bars at every aid station. One runner passed him sipping from a custom bottle with his own name printed on the side. Another had a coach on a bicycle riding beside him, shouting pace splits and encouragement. They glanced at Bryson as they went by, some with pity, some without looking at all, and disappeared ahead. Bryson had nothing. No water, no fuel, no coach, no voice telling him he could make it. He hadn't eaten since 2 slices of bread with peanut butter at 4:45 that morning. His body was running on fumes, and the fumes were running out. At mile 23, Trevor Whitfield looked back over his shoulder. He had been checking every minute since mile 20, waiting for exactly this, for the Barefoot kid to break. And now it was happening. Trevor saw Bryson fading, stumbling, falling behind. And he smiled. The kind of smile a man smiles when the world confirms what he always believed. That some people belong at the front, and some people belong nowhere at all. Trevor relaxed his pace. He waved to the cameras. He pointed at his Apex Athletics logo with both hands. He was already composing the victory interview in his head. At mile 23.5, Bryson nearly stopped. His body was shutting down. His legs buckled. He stumbled forward, caught himself, stumbled again. A race volunteer on a bicycle pulled alongside him, matching his slowing pace, and spoke to him gently, the way you speak to someone who is hurt and doesn't know it yet. Son, there's no shame in stopping. You've done something incredible already. Let us get you some medical attention. Bryson looked at the volunteer. The man's face was kind. His voice was sincere. And for one terrible, honest moment, Bryson considered it, stopping, sitting down on the curb, letting the medics wrap his feet, letting it be over, letting the pain finally end. Then he looked down at his wrist. Underwood, Denise, room 208. The letters were faded, smudged with sweat, but they were there. And behind those letters was a hospital bed. And in that bed was a woman with thin arms and IV lines, and a whisper that sounded like it came from the other side of the world. "Bring it back to me, baby." He remembered the morning. Her fingers, barely strong enough to work the clasp, sliding the bracelet off her own wrist. The weight of it settling onto his skin. The way she looked at him like she was memorizing his face in case she never saw it again. And then he remembered something else. The starting line. The laughter. The banana hitting his shoulder. The water splashing across his bare toes. Garrett leaning into his ear. "You're going to embarrass yourself out there, boy." Trevor's grin, dangling shoelaces in his face like he was teasing a dog. The woman screaming to check if he stole his bib. The man in the red jacket shouting to drag him out. Every voice, every insult, every laugh. All of it, stored, compressed, waiting. Something shifted behind Bryson's eyes. It was not anger. It was deeper than anger. It was a door slamming shut, a lock turning, a furnace igniting in a room that had been dark for a very long time. The pain didn't disappear. It just stopped mattering, like it belonged to someone else now. He straightened his back, his jaw locked. His eyes went flat and fixed on the road ahead. And then Bryson Underwood did something that would be replayed on sports networks around the world for years to come. He accelerated, not gradually, not gently. He surged forward like something had been unleashed, like a chain had snapped and the thing it was holding back was finally free. His stride lengthened. His forefoot strike returned, precise as a metronome, each step landing exactly where it needed to. His breathing deepened and locked back into rhythm. 3 in, 2 out. 3 in, 2 out. He passed 6th place, then 5th, then 4th, then 3rd. Each runner fell away behind him like they were moving in slow motion, and Bryson was the only person on the course running in real time. The crowd along the final stretch, 6 and 8 people deep now, pressed hard against the barricades, erupted. They had seen the broadcast. They knew who he was. They knew about his mother. They knew about room 208. And now they were watching this barefoot, battered, starving young man refuse to die on this road. The chanting began. One voice first, then 10, then 100, then 1,000. Then a wall of sound so thick you could feel it vibrating in your chest and rattling in your teeth. "Bryson! Bryson! Bryson!" He caught Trevor Whitfield at mile 25. They ran side by side, stride for stride, shadow against shadow on the hot asphalt, one sleek and sponsored, one ragged and raw. 2 silhouettes, equal in speed, unequal in everything else. Trevor glanced sideways. His face showed something it had never shown in any race before. Fear. Not the fear of losing a trophy, the fear of losing to something he could not buy, could not train for, could not understand. Trevor surged. Bryson matched him. Trevor surged again, harder, throwing everything into his legs. Bryson matched him again. The crowd was screaming so loud now that neither runner could hear his own breathing. Trevor looked sideways one final time at Bryson's face, and what he saw made something inside him collapse. There was no anger in those eyes, no rivalry, no desire to humiliate. There was only one thing, one single, burning, unbreakable thing. a son running toward his mother. The finish line banner appeared, red and white, stretched across Columbus Drive. A corridor of screaming human beings, phones raised everywhere. Tears streaming down faces Bryson had never seen and would never see again. Bryson pulled ahead. Not with a dramatic sprint. He pulled ahead the way dawn pulls ahead of darkness. Quietly, inevitably, with the certainty of something that was always going to happen. One foot in front of the other. Bare. Battered. Unstoppable. Trevor had nothing left. His $380 shoes, his compression gear, his nutritionist, his sports psychologist. Every dollar, every advantage, every system built to make him unbeatable, all of it fell short of one single thing. A reason to run that was bigger than himself. Bryson crossed the finish line. The clock stopped. 2 hours, 0 minutes, 14 seconds. 50,000 people held one breath at the same time. Then the announcer's voice came through the speakers. Cracking, trembling, thick with disbelief. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a new world record. 2 hours, 0 minutes, and 14 seconds. Set by an 18-year-old young man. Running barefoot, with no sponsor, no team, no shoes. A new world record. The eruption that followed was unlike anything in the history of that race. 50,000 people, screaming, sobbing, grabbing strangers by the shoulders and shaking them. The sound was so loud, it registered as distortion on the broadcast microphones. Car alarms triggered 2 blocks away. Bryson did not raise his arms. He did not pose for the cameras locked onto him from every angle. He fell to his knees on the pavement. He lifted his left wrist to his lips. He pressed the hospital bracelet, his mother's bracelet, the one she had placed on him that morning with hands that could barely hold on, against his mouth. And he said, quietly, to no one and to everyone, to the road and the sky, and a woman in a hospital bed 20 miles south. I'm bringing it back, Mama. The medical team reached him before the cameras did. They knelt beside him on the pavement and went straight for his feet. What they found made 2 of them look away. His soles were raw, blistered, swollen, the skin peeled back in sheets from 26 miles of scorching asphalt. They wrapped both feet in gauze and cold compresses while Bryson sat perfectly still, perfectly calm, his hand still resting on the bracelet. Race Commissioner Nora Sullivan walked through the crowd of officials and cameras and knelt beside him. Not behind a podium, not from a stage. She knelt on the ground, at his level, looked him in the eye, and shook his hand. You didn't just win this race, she said. You redefined it. 48 seconds later, Trevor Whitfield crossed the finish line. 2nd place. He slowed to a stop and stood there, chest heaving, hands on his knees, staring at the ground. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he straightened up, looked across the finish area to where Bryson was sitting on the pavement, surrounded by medics, and began walking toward him. The cameras followed every step. Trevor knelt in front of Bryson. Without a word, he unlaced his Apex Velocity racing shoes. $380, custom fitted, the best technology money could buy, and placed them on the ground in front of the young man who had just beaten him, barefoot. His voice was rough, stripped. Nothing left of the man who had dangled shoelaces and told a stranger to call an Uber. I was wrong about you. I've never been more wrong about anything in my life. Bryson looked at the shoes, looked at Trevor. He didn't lecture him, didn't remind him of the starting line. He shook his hand and nodded once, a nod that carried more grace and dignity than any victory speech ever spoken. Across the finish area, near the registration tent where the morning had begun, Garrett Collins stood alone. His face was gray. The phone footage from that morning, his hand on Bryson's shoulder, the order to remove him, the crowd laughing, the banana, the water bottle, was already everywhere. Hashtag justice for Bryson was climbing alongside hashtag run for Denise. His earpiece was silent. No one was calling him. He removed his lanyard, set it on the table, and walked to his car without looking back. Helen Moore stood behind the barricade near the finish line, her hands clasped in front of her. Tears ran down her face. She said nothing. She didn't need to. 19 years of volunteering, and this was the only moment that mattered. The prize ceremony was simple. No stage, no velvet ropes. Just Commissioner Sullivan holding a check and a young man sitting on the pavement with bandaged feet. $50,000. Bryson held it with both hands. "It's not enough," he said quietly, "but it's a start." His mother's surgery cost $85,000, but Bryson didn't know what was already happening on the other side of a screen. Sandra Wells's broadcast had crossed oceans. Within 48 hours, a crowdfunding campaign, created by a stranger in Milwaukee who had watched the segment and cried in her car, raised $1.2 million from 60 countries. One message, shared over 400,000 times, said what all of them meant. "Run for my mother too, Bryson." Sponsors scrambled. Apex Athletics offered a deal. NovaCare offered to cover Denise's costs directly. 3 Division I programs called Coach Davidson. An Olympic Foundation extended an invitation. But all of that was noise compared to what happened that evening. Bryson arrived at Southside General Hospital just after 7. Feet wrapped in gauze, bib 312 still pinned to his chest. He limped into room 208. Coach Davidson stood in the corner, arms folded, eyes red. Bryson sat on the edge of his mother's bed, unclasped the hospital bracelet, and slid it back onto her wrist. Denise held his hand and said, "You brought it back." He rested his head against her shoulder, and for the first time in the entire story, Bryson cried. 6 weeks later, Denise underwent surgery. Fully funded, successful. 3 months after that, cancer-free. The first thing she did when she left the hospital was walk to Grant Park, stand at the starting line where her son had been mocked and shoved, and whisper, "He brought it back." The race board reviewed every video from that morning. Garrett Collins was terminated. A public apology was issued. A new anti-discrimination policy was written into the regulations. No registered participant would ever be questioned or removed based on appearance, race, or economic status. They named it the Underwood Rule. Bryson's face appeared on ESPN, CNN, the BBC. The photograph of him on his knees, bracelet pressed to his lips, became one of the most shared sports images in history. But he did not chase fame, did not sign a mega deal, did not move to a penthouse. He went back to the South Side. 1 year later, Bryson became a youth running coach at the same high school where Coach Davidson had discovered him. He coached kids who reminded him of himself, kids who ran barefoot, kids whose talent had never been seen because nobody had bothered to look. On the first day of practice, he stood before 15 young runners on a cracked asphalt track and said the only thing that mattered. "The world is going to tell you that you don't belong, that you're not fast enough, not rich enough, not good enough. They're going to laugh. They're going to throw things. They're going to try to pull you off the track. Your only job is to keep running. That's it. Just keep running. Coach Davidson watched from the bleachers, arms crossed, tears in his eyes, and a smile that said everything words could not. This story is not about running. It is about what we see and what we refuse to see. An entire crowd looked at Bryson Underwood and saw bare feet, an oversized shirt, dark skin, and poverty. They saw a punchline, a disruption, someone who didn't belong. They threw food at him, threw insults at him, tried to drag him off the track before he could take a single step. Not one of them saw a son trying to save his mother's life. We live in a world that sorts people in seconds, by their shoes, their clothes, their skin, their zip code. We decide instantly who deserves respect and who doesn't. And we are wrong. More often than any of us will ever have the courage to admit. Bryson didn't run to prove them wrong. He didn't run for revenge. He didn't run to make a statement. He ran because his mother was dying in a hospital bed, and he had nothing to offer her except his body, his feet, and 26 miles of will. The world record was a side effect. The fame was a side effect. The sponsors, the headlines, the $1 million fundraiser, all side effects. Side effects of a young man who loved his mother enough to endure 26 miles of agony on bare feet while the whole world laughed. And then the whole world stopped laughing and started chanting his name. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone you judged too quickly, someone you dismissed because they didn't look the part, someone whose talent you never saw because you were too busy looking at everything else, then share it. Not for this channel, for the next Bryson. The one standing barefoot at some starting line right now, waiting for just one person to see him. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe, because every week we tell the stories the world tried to silence.
I need you to hear this. We judge people in seconds by their shoes, their clothes, the neighborhood they come from. We look at someone and decide in a blink whether they deserve our respect or not. And the most of the time, we are dead wrong. But we'll never know it because we already look away. That's the real tragedy. Not that people get underestimated, but that we lose what they could have given us because we never gave them a chance to show it. How much talent is out there right now, invisible, because nobody bothered to look past the surface. But here's what gives me chills. You can laugh at someone, you can throw things, you can try to drag them off the track, but you cannot stop someone who's running for something bigger than themselves. When the reason is real, when it's love, when it's a survivor, when it's someone you die for. No amount of noise from the outside can touch what's burning on the inside. So tell me, have you ever been counted out before you even started? Or did you watch someone prove the whole world wrong? Drop it in the comments. If this one hit you, share it, like it, subscribe so you will hear for the next one. And next time you see someone who doesn't look apart, look again. You might be looking at greatness.